Hello, 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 and welcome to the sauna, fellow campfire gatherers. I'm Phoebe J. Rose, and we're back. We're back, wonderful people, and I have a guest with me. So it's incredible. Who the heck are you? Who are you?
I am Malcolm. God damn it, Malcolm on everything.
God damn it,
and-
Malcolm! How'd you get in here?
Exactly.
How did you get in here?
I found my way in. The door was open, like a stray cat.
See, that was my problem. I did you like a breadcrumbs of food, and you just went, "Oh, hello, I'll come."
A little bit, yeah.
So we are back after my summer break that I like to take around this time of the year, and we're back with the wonderful Malcolm. So Malcolm, why don't you tell the wonderful people who are crammed into the sauna a little bit about yourself and who you are, and yeah.
Well, I am a trans guy, and I like to talk about trans stuff as a trans guy. Just because there's very few of us that float around on the internet, and a lot of the spaces that are trans masculine specific are usually really toxic. So just try to be funny and nice and make a little corner of the internet for trans people to not be horrible to each other for once in a while. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I saw you co-hosting the Transatlantic Calling Show, and went, that's wonderful. You'll make a great guest. And I thought, I'll ask you, and you said yes. So, what was it like doing an all trans masc show on Transatlantic, the first one? How did that go down for you?
I was pretty good. I enjoy it. I always like collaborating with other trans guys, especially in like the kind of streaming space because there's not a lot of us. And I've been doing all trans masculine everything panels for I want to say maybe a year, just about. And I just kind of like the community that comes with like hanging out with other trans guys. Hanging out with other trans people is cool, but sometimes it's cool to just hang out with have some boy time, have some time with the guys, sometimes that's a little nice.
So, when you say that there's very few trans guys, how does that affect you?
It's actually really frustrating, honestly. I spend a lot of time I either watch like conversation content or debate content or panel content. It's kind of like white noise for my brain. So if I'm cleaning the house, if I'm driving to work, whatever, I'm usually like listening to a podcast or something. And the way that politics is now, unfortunately, every conversation turns into a conversation about trans people. As I'm sure that you know, it doesn't matter what we're talking about.
Yes,
It's
precisely.
somehow gets there.
It's like
Somehow
I'm a
it gets
trans
there.
athlete, and it's like I feel like I'm on the front line. I mean, a good friend of mine who's also been on this show had a Daily Mail hit piece done on them and protesters at a football match they were playing in.
It's like it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Somehow trans people get brought up. It doesn't matter what it could be, right? The conversation always goes there. So for the past few years in my frustration, I've watched in horror as panels with, like 5 cis guys, 1 trans woman, kind of speculate on trans masculine experiences. Just, like beating my desk and yelling in the car. And I'm like, that's a lie. Like, that's fake. Like, why would you? Just kind of losing my mind. I'm having
Going
to listen
full
to this.
Donald Trump. This is fake news.
Exactly. Like having to hear that on repeat all the time. So I kind of was like, this is bullshit. Like there aren't any trans guys that are streaming. There aren't any trans guys that are talking about this. Obviously there are trans guys who stream, but in this very niche specific space, I was like, you know what? This is stupid. Like nobody's doing this. Like this is something that we need to do. Otherwise people are just going to keep assuming things about us. So I was like, I guess I'll do it. I guess I'll be the one.
It's like that sounds very similar to what I started the show. It's like, it would be nice to hear stories about trans people and how they transition so that people that come after me can have that. It's like, oh, guess I'll do it then. Which kind of like feels like the trans bootstrapper, because it's like they give you a pair of pink, white, and blue bootstraps and go, yeah, do it yourself.
Exactly.
So how did you find your entry into the world of streaming? How was that for you?
I started making YouTube videos a long time ago when I first transitioned, mostly about like prosthetics that I had bought and reviewed, or like binders, like that kind of stuff. And then a couple of years ago, I started doing, I guess you could say like commentary, I suppose. And then that kind of got boring to me, and I started doing like conversation content. And it was probably like a year and a half ago maybe like a year and a half ago that I just started streaming on Twitch because the monetization on YouTube just sucks. And I thought it would be interesting to try like a different platform. I don't love YouTube's live streaming because the TOS it's kind of like the wild, wild west. And that kind of stresses me out a little bit. So I figured I would just try my hand at it, and it's been okay so far. No, I enjoy
So
it.
for those of you watching this stream, if you're watching this on YouTube, head over to the Twitch page. There's a Twitch page you can watch this one as well. And if you're on the Twitch page, head over to the YouTube page because stream on both at the moment because both YouTube and Twitch say that I'm not deserving of money yet. But there is someone who's just popped in who will say hi, who is now monetized on both the YouTube and the Twitch. So if you go and watch Medical Myths after this show, you can put a couple of quid in the direction of the wonderful student, Dr. Ben. So yes. But yes, getting back to the content of the show and the shilling of good friends of mine, when exactly did you begin your transition and what do you consider to be the start for you?
I started medically transitioning in 2016. So it's been 6 years on hormones, like last month to the day, which is exciting. Yay. Happy 6 months of 6 years of irreversible damage.
Oh dear.
I
Abigail Shire, she'll be after you if you're not careful.
I know it's probably copyrighted or something. She'll get me one of these days, but I'm too quick right now.
Oh dear.
I kind of I signify the start of my transition with when I started hormones. I came out probably in 2015. I kind of describe my experience as like a textbook trans person experience because I had dysphoria from like an incredibly young age. Like my earliest memories were like, oh, like I just want to like pee in the woods with the guys and like, swim without a shirt on and all that other kind of stuff. And I lived as a boy probably until puberty hit because I went to Catholic school. So the kids that I would meet, like out and about, like at the park or in my neighborhood, they didn't know me because we didn't go to the same school. So I could play it off and be like, oh yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like you can call me like Gary or whatever, And then after puberty, I couldn't really do that anymore. It was very obvious that I wasn't a little boy anymore. And I was like, fuck, I guess that this is just something that I have to do. I didn't know that transitioning was an option. And then when I got into college, I met somebody my age who was medically transitioning. And I was like, oh, cool. Like I didn't know this was something that I could do. And that is kind of when I started. And that's when I would like signify my start is when I started hormones, at least for myself.
So going all the way back, and you say that it was a textbook transition, and would you say it was a stereotypical transition?
For the most part, yeah. The only thing that I would say that's atypical is I feel like a lot of people that I've spoken to, their first experience of other trans people was kind of traumatic. Seems like a really strong word, but almost like aversive. Like you see like the crazy person on like Jerry Springer and you're like, oh my God, like averting your eyes. You're like, oh no.
Jerry Springer.
Yeah, a lot of people will like explain their first experiences like with trans people as being, like they saw somebody on the TV and their parents were just like screaming slurs and they're like, uh-oh, like I definitely can't do that. But my experience was pretty tame. I knew about Chaz Bono because my grandparents liked Sonny and Cher, and they didn't really have anything crazy to say about him. And then when Caitlyn Jenner came out, my parents were, pretty tame about it. I saw some of the bullshit about Caitlyn Jenner, but it wasn't like this horrible experience where it was like, oh my God, like everybody's going to want to like stone me to death if I come out. It was pretty neutral, like my first exposure to trans people. And that seems to be a little atypical from the people that I've talked to about it.
Because especially over this side of the pond, we do have some very, how can I say, unique representations of trans people in the media. Because I remember the very first time I watched it, they actually had an entire documentary series on TV called My Transsexual Summer. And one of the headlines was, Channel 4 engages in gender tourism.
I like that. That's good.
It's like you've just dipped into, being a transsexual for the summer, and then you go back to, your normal life. It's like, oh dear. But it's interesting you bring up Chaz Bono and Caitlyn Jenner. Do you think that those people were positive influences on you, negative influences on you, or just, oh, there's another trans person?
I think it was pretty neutral. The only thing that I would say is that because the only exposure that I had to trans people up until like I want to say like 2014 was like celebrities. I didn't think that was ever something that was like what I could do, right? It was kind of like, oh, I guess I'm not like super loaded. I'm not like a celebrity. This isn't something that I can do. But other than that, it was pretty neutral. It wasn't too crazy. It wasn't too bad.
So let's roll all the way back to your childhood. And you mentioned you went to a Catholic school. Did that school influence how you viewed your own gender?
Honestly, no. Catholic school, I from everybody that I've talked to that has gone to Catholic school, apparently I just went to it. I had an exceptionally chill parish. Because for everybody else that's gone to Catholic school, they were like, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I was like, oh, it was actually not that bad if I'm being honest, if I'm remembering correctly. Because I would always wear, we had like these little, obviously the girls had to wear like skirts, skirts, or jumpers, and then boys had to wear pants or shorts, and polo shirts to go to mass and everything. And we go to mass on Wednesdays and Fridays. And I would sneak pants into my backpack. And so I would get to school and I would change into the pants and they'd get so pissed. They'd be like, what are you doing? Go and put your jumper back on. You can't just wear pants. Like, we're calling your parents. And probably after like 4 months of this, they were like, you know what? Actually, wear whatever you want. Like, we're done trying to fight with you. So they were actually, it was surprisingly like a very chill Catholic school. And I don't feel like that really impacted any of that. Even when I came out as gay, early in my life, I wasn't like, oh no, fire and brimstone in hell. Like, apparently I just had like the one good Catholic school experience.
Well, it had to be out there. I mean, the stereotype had to be, broken by something. And it appears that on my show today, we found Malcolm and his good Catholic school experience. So I'm slightly floored by that, in all honesty. You hear all this wall of negativity about the Catholic Church, and then it's like, oh, I went to a decent Catholic school.
It's the one good one, I guess. It's the one
they
good
didn't care. It's like, oh. Well, but you mentioned that when puberty hit, you couldn't keep the facade up, almost, that you were a quote little boy, a male. So how did that impact on you, and how did you deal with those changes that happened?
So I went to Catholic school until I think I was in like 6th or 7th grade. And then I went to public school, and public school sucked. I hated it. I was terrible. And when I went from middle school to high school, I think so, 8th grade to 9th grade.
Ninth.
Yep, we have different, like, middle school, 7th and 8th grade has like their own school, and then high school is a different school. So it's a really weird setup. And when I went to high school that summer, I like cut off all of my hair. And so when I was at school, the people who knew me knew that I wasn't a boy, but like other people thought that I was. So that was kind of fun for me, kind of like exciting. I was like, ooh, the secret. Like, can we keep up the charade? And then at the end of 9th grade, my parents moved. And so I switched schools again. And I was like, okay, like, I can't really do this anymore. Like, my voice is too high. Like, I'm starting to develop, like, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of was like, I guess we'll just do it. Like, there's nothing that I can do about it. So for the first probably like year that I was at this new school, I was like very hyper feminine, like, and wore like a lot of makeup, like a lot of like yoga pants. I don't even remember what girls wore when I was in like 10th grade. Really stupid stuff, like the camis and the all that other stupid stuff. And then I kind of like slowly like leaned back into like presenting more masculine. I guess you could say like a STEM lesbian. But there was like that year where I was just like, you know what, fuck it. Like, I guess I have to do this. And then I was like super feminine, and then I kind of settled a little bit into a more masculine presentation.
When you were going through this hyper feminine phase, did that have any impact on your mental health at all, as well as your physical appearance? Because was it like you were character acting, or was it you being you still?
It kind of just felt like something that I did to make everybody else happy. My mom really wanted me, because like when I went to Catholic school, it wasn't an issue because we just wore uniforms. We didn't have to like dress, like pick out our own clothes or anything. And my mom was always really like, we should do your hair, like we should do your makeup, we should do your nails. And I just was never into that. And it was the same thing, like at school, like a lot of the kids would be like, why don't you wear this? Like, why don't you do something with your hair? Like, you would look really cute if you put on like this dress or whatever. And so it felt like I was just doing it for other people, to get other people to leave me alone. I didn't like doing it, but it was like a little bit of like, okay, like everybody can fuck off now. But it was very short lived, because it was like, man, girl clothes are very uncomfortable. So I was not having the best time.
It sounds almost like you did that as like, okay, I'm going to buy this product, and then I'm going to say I've tried this product, and then I'm going to return this product. Is that how it was?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I tried it, didn't like it, wasn't for me. Sorry.
So we've moved through this hyperfem phase, and you're in your quote STEM, lesbian, almost however you describe yourself. And
Mhm.
what age are we talking of about now?
Probably like 16 till I was like 20.
So we're talking like early college days,
Yeah, like late high school, early college.
late
Yeah.
high school, early college. And
Mhm.
then what happened after you were about 20 then?
I was at college and one of my acquaintances, I guess you could say, something about like, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just where I am. I went to high school in not a very big town. Everybody who was gay knew each other and had hooked up with each other. So through like an X of an X of an X, I knew this person who had started transitioning. And I was like, oh, like that's actually really cool. And they were like, oh, do you want to talk to them? I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like, that's cool. And it was just like that exposure to somebody who was my age, who was doing what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, wow, that's actually really cool. I didn't know that I could do that, was essentially what kind of made the buck stop, so to speak.
And what exactly was it in this context?
Like being able to medically transition.
And so would you say that you had kind of always had a social transition element of you?
Yeah, I think that it was kind of fluid just because it was context dependent. It depended on like who I was with. My dad, absolutely not. My mom worked a lot, so she wasn't really around. My grandparents didn't care. My friends from school, absolutely not. If it was a bunch of random kids at the park, whatever. It just depended on like the context. But I feel like for some time, I was definitely able to be like fluid in that and kind of mess with it and have fun with it. Yeah.
And so we're talking 2016 now, I'm assuming, and you're beginning your medical transition. And what did you think it would look like when you started?
I gotta be honest, I'm not really sure if I remember entirely. Because I was on a wait list for I think 6 months. And I was going to gender therapy at the same time to get my letter from my endocrinologist. And I was kind of doing like, I guess you could say like DIY research, right? Where like I'm looking at timelines, I'm watching videos, I'm like asking questions in groups, I'm talking to people who've been transitioning for a while, just to kind of like get an idea of like what happens, when it happens, like, what kind of surgery options are there, et cetera. Just kind of like figuring out what this is going to look like for me. Um, I honestly don't remember like what I anticipated. I think the biggest thing was like getting to that point where I passed, because I was kind of in like that middle ground where like I was really androgynous with the way that I dressed and like my hair, but I had a decently high voice and I didn't have any facial hair. My bone structure hadn't really moved around a whole lot. Obviously, I was binding all the time, which was uncomfortable. I worked in kitchens and stuff. And I think that was kind of just like I was like, I just want to like hit this marker. I don't know what it looks like, but that's where I want to be, and that's kind of what I was waiting for, I guess.
And did you ever find that what actually happened was in any way less than what you expected? I won't use the word disappointment, but was it ever less than what you expected?
I feel like the only thing, honestly, like two things. One, I didn't gain like 6 inches of height. That was really disappointing. And then, and then,
So I didn't lose 6 inches of height. I say I'm 6'4".
exactly.
I'm a
It's like,
tall woman. It's like I'm sat down in this chair. I don't sit up in this. If I sit up in this chair, I start doing this.
it's one of those things where it's like, damn, that was like the one thing, and you let me down. That, and then also, obviously I knew this wasn't going to be the case, but I was a little upset that it wasn't almost like instantaneous. Like I do like my first shot and then I have a full beard and I'm like, perfect. This is just what I wanted. Like obviously the kind of waiting, I was like, oh, are you serious right now? That was a little disappointing as well.
So for my guests who may not be up to speed on what medical transition for a trans masc is, because I'm a trans woman. I know I could tell you the whole gamut from here to Christmas about what it's like for a trans woman. What exactly does medical transition mean to you? And what does it contain for you as a trans man, trans masc individual?
For me personally, and I always try to like frame this as me because I don't want to talk about other people. Obviously, I know that there's some problematic people that do that. I try not to do that. For
This is
me,
Malcolm's story, not Malcolm's story speaking for every trans masc guy out there.
if you don't transition just like me, I got some bad news for you. No, I'm just
That's
kidding.
your transition, and you can come on my show and talk about your transition.
I'm just kidding. For me, it's medical transition is just like anything where I'm like altering my body like physiologically or physically. So with hormone replacement therapy or with surgery, I would constitute any of that as like medical transition. The whole kit and caboodle for me would be like the end of the road. So I've been in the process of trying to get phalloplasty for like 3-4 years now, and it's just been a nightmare. But after I'm done with that, I will consider my transition complete.
So, what was the first medical thing that you did then?
Hormones.
So, when we say hormones, we're talking about a nice vial and a nice hypodermic syringe, and it's called testosterone on it. I'm assuming.
Yep.
If I could give you my testosterone, you'd be welcome to it.
the shot.
You'd be welcome to it. You'd be welcome to my testosterone up the wazoo. But how difficult was it for you to actually get to that point where you actually held the testosterone in your hand?
It was at the time it was terrible. Like obviously hindsight, I'm like, I guess it wasn't like that terrible. But I came out in, I want to say like 2015, middle of 2016, probably in, I think it was June is when I started. I had to get a referral for an endocrinologist. I had to be on a wait list to see the endocrinologist. And then I had to go to like 6 months of gender therapy before they would write me a letter to get it covered by insurance and the endocrinologist would treat me. During that time, I was like, holy shit, this is like an eternity. But looking back on it, I thought it was actually, for me personally, I found it actually pretty helpful to kind of have that time to kind of do a little bit of that discovery and like think about it and kind of process with somebody else as well. Because it was one thing for me to like sit, at home on my phone and look at like transition timelines and read about things on Reddit or like ask people questions in Facebook groups, but being able to like in real time, like bounce ideas off of somebody, who for the most part knew what they were talking about, right? Like obviously this wasn't like a gender studies professor or anything, but just like the gist of it, being able to like kind of just process like kind of what I was thinking, my expectations, what I was feeling, what I think this is going to do for me. What are some things that I don't want? Just being able to go through that in hindsight, I found that to be like actually really helpful. At the time I was like, oh, I have to wait forever. But like now, I'm like, oh, well, 6 months, a blip in the universe. Like you're okay.
But when you were going through those 6 months, did you know it was only going to be 6 months? Or did you know that it could have been longer or it could have been shorter? Or were you not given any timescale?
I was given 6 months by my insurance to get coverage, and then I was given a letter of 6 months worth of therapy for the endocrinologist to treat me.
Okay.
So I was aware of the 6 months. I knew that like if for whatever reason, I don't know, they were like, you're full of shit, I would have to go longer. But thankfully that didn't happen, I guess.
Was there ever a fear in your head that this random medical professional would actually turn around and go, that you're full of shit? Was that ever in your head?
Yeah, I think part of the struggle for me was being really, really careful. Like I'm sure that anybody who has ever gone to therapy has done like that cute little tap dance where it's like, how am I honest, but also I don't get institutionalized? Like how honest are we being with each other? The person that I went to for the first, I had one person for 4 months, and then after for another year, I had somebody else. I just kept going after because I didn't mind it at all. They were all really like, I don't even know the word, how to explain it. They were like really supportive only because my parents were such assholes about it. So I feel like I had like this little safeguard where they were like, okay, like I see that your parents are like insane. I guess we can work together a little bit over here. I was like, okay, cool. Thank you guys.
There's some meat behind this that I can, get my therapeutic teeth into, so to speak.
Yeah. They were like, let's set this aside. I actually want to talk about this. Like, I believe you on this stuff. Let's talk about this instead. I was like, perfect. That sounds great to me.
So you mentioned that your parents were, how can I say this, not the most rounded individuals when it came to acceptance. How was coming out to them then? And how did you do it?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was the worst. So my mom is very Catholic. My dad is not very Catholic, but he's very conservative. Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh are like his personal Jesus. Um, very, very
If
strange.
it wasn't copyrighted, I'd play the song right
Yeah.
now, Personal Jesus. But that's copyrighted.
Yeah, so they're really hyper conservative. Coming out as gay, my mom didn't really care. She was like, whatever. My dad was like, this is like, I can't believe, like, do you want like more rights than straight people? Like, what is your agenda? He's like one of those people. And I was like, whatever, I just kind of let it go. So when I came out, immediately it was like Google article after Google article after Google article, like transgendertrend.com, fourth wave now, gender HQ, like you're gonna die if you transition, like you're gonna pass away immediately, like all this kind of shit. And I had told my parents, I forget what I said. I must have like wrote him a note or something. I don't remember what I said. And it was just like fighting me the entire time, like the whole time, like, don't do this, please don't do this. Like, I'll do anything. Like, please don't do this. You're going to ruin your life, please. It was really reminiscent of when I got my first tattoo. Obviously a little bit more intense, but that's kind of what it reminded me of. And after a while, my parents kind of chilled out. My dad is still like horrible about everything. My mom doesn't.
Would he be horrible though about everything, regardless, or is this something he takes particular interest in?
He's like a particularly negative and pessimistic person. So it's just kind of all encompassing that everything is the worst thing in the world, unfortunately.
I don't mean to sound, but as an outsider looking in at your father, would your father be a stereotypical person that was not on the side of Joe Biden having legitimately won the election kind of individual?
Yeah, there were definitely questions about that for sure over, like Sunday dinner. Like, well, what about that mysterious box of votes? It's like, well, you mean the one that was under the desk the entire time?
You mean the one that they filmed when they walked in from like a great distance away that then mysteriously never moved?
Yep, and then they moved it at the end of the day when everybody was already done. That one, yeah, I did see that one.
Yeah, that one that still had the seals on it. Still had all the seals on it.
Exactly. Yeah, he's kind of fallen down a pipeline. I don't know how to reach him. He's, I have that boundary where it's like, we're just not going to talk about this. We can talk about the weather. We can talk about sports. We're not going to talk about politics. We're not going to talk about anything trans. We're not going to talk about anything gay. We're just going to enjoy the day together. Hey, nothing else. That's all we're going to do.
Just going to, go fishing or something and just, sit there in quiet solitude and talk about the still calmness of the lake.
I actually prefer the gun range because we have to wear ear protection, so he can't talk to me even if he wants to. So it's like,
well, sorry, that's not something you really get in the UK, firing range. But there is somewhere near me where you do get, to experience firearms, shall we say, and it's quite an experience. But your father being one of these people that. Do you think your father accepts you as who you are, or do you think your father thinks that you're still who is this person that's different to who you are now in his head?
I think it depends, honestly, on his mood. He's kind of one of those people that will like drag up old stuff every time you fight. Like, well, do you remember in like 2017 when you didn't take out the garbage? And you're like, whoa, shit. He kind of does that. So for like 99.9% of the time, he's totally fine with it. I kind of had like a come to Jesus talk with him about it one time because he said something in public. And I went to college somewhere where it was pretty good. It was a pretty conservative area. And he came down for something and he, was calling me my old name and misgendering me. And I was like, I kind of pulled him aside and I was like, hey, like, listen, difference of opinion. If this is what you think of me, fantastic. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Please don't do this in public because if the wrong person hears you, I'm just going to get punched in the face. So maybe we should.
Worse.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe we should just like be mindful of that. And he was like, that's actually a really good point. I didn't think about that. I'm sorry. So it's just like little teeny tiny blocks. He's gotten a little bit better. He came with me when I went to get my hysterectomy and he was very sympathetic. So it's been a very long process. I don't really know where he falls right now. It's been about 5 years and he finally changed my name in his phone. His office is literally a fucking shrine to me. It's very creepy. But we're getting there slowly. It's taking time. He's old, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. He's getting there. But I just live and let live. If you want to go and be weird over there, that's fine. I'm just going to do my thing over here. I just don't want to hear about it,
So you mentioned your mother is a deeply Catholic individual.
Mm-hmm.
How's the relationship between you and your mother?
Very good, actually. My mom has always kind of been like my best friend for life. Um, I think my mom is one of those people that I think is like, when I think of religious people, I think of people who like weaponize their religion to just be horrible to other people. My mom is like actually a Catholic, like very empathetic, like very kind, very caring, very invested in like the well-being of other people. Um, like cares a lot about like poor people, homeless people, like a lot of the things that are taught in the excuse me. Oh my god, I'm choking. That are taught in the Bible that she actually believes in. So she's been like pretty chill. She's like, I think that we just all need to be nice. Like, I don't always understand what you're doing or why you're doing what you're doing, but like I love you anyway, like that kind of stuff. It's very refreshing.
And how was it when you came out to your mum then?
It was hard at first. The girl that I was dating at the time, my mom thought that I was transitioning for her. And then we broke up a long time ago. And so after that, it was a little bit easier for her to be like, okay, like, I guess this is something that you want to do. It's not somebody like kind of like making you do this. And I had to do like the very long explanation of like, well, mom, in therapy, they would just turn me away if I was like, well, my girlfriend wants me to be a man. They would just say goodbye. So unfortunately, that's not what happened. But
Insurance won't cover that.
I know. I'm like, that's actually in the clause if you look at the fine print of the insurance. But she's gotten better.
Doing this for someone else. Lying through that person.
Exactly. So she's been significantly better about that. I think that she just really didn't like my girlfriend at the time, so it was kind of anything to be like, she's bad, and now that she's gone, it doesn't matter.
So you've come out to your parents, and do you have any siblings, or are you an only child?
I have one brother who is, I think he's like 9 years older than me, 9 or 10 years older than me. He's significantly older than I am.
And do you have a relationship with him?
Kind of. We just like, we don't have really anything in common. And he was so much older than me when I was growing up. We didn't spend a lot of time together. And so now it's just like, he's just like there. He's also really quiet. He doesn't talk a lot. So anytime that we hang out, we just kind of like look at each other for an extended period of time. So he's not like my favorite person to hang out with. Like, I don't mind him. I don't have any issues with him, but we just
like
go.
Two dudes in a room just going, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how was your day? Fine.
Mine was good too.
Yeah, I'm like,
how's work?
Yep.
You still got that job? Yes.
Exactly. Love him to death, but we just are on different wavelengths, and that's fine.
Different types of, so it's like you're looking forwards and they're looking sideways.
Exactly. We're just not connecting, and that's okay. We're just not connecting, and that's all right.
So, do you consider yourself to be a religious person, having a religious mother, having gone to religious schools? Do you consider yourself to be a religious person?
Yes and no. I really enjoy like the orthodoxy and the tradition of Catholicism because like I went to Catholic school, so I like the Stations of the Cross, I like taking communion, I like doing confession. Like I think that's all like fun, and I like it because it's like familiar to me. And then the other part of me also has like this horrible nihilism where I'm like everything is fake and nothing happens when you die. So I kind of like teeter back and forth in between that. But I do still enjoy like the orthodoxy and the community and all that other stuff that came from my parish, which was surprisingly pleasant. As I said, I feel like I have the niche experience here. So
yeah. So as someone who identifies as having a Catholic past and a Catholic upbringing, how does the current attitudes of Catholic leadership towards trans people affect you?
Honestly, not that much. A lot of the parish that I go to is pretty liberal in like almost every kind of application. The way that I explain it is kind of like independent Dairy Queen owners, and then there's like corporate Dairy Queen. Like independent owners can do whatever the fuck they want. So they're like, oh yeah, look, I'll put the menu up or whatever, and then they never.
I'll use the Dairy Queen branding and things like that.
Exactly. That's kind of how like my parish operates, where it's like, yeah, like the Pope is the one that like talks right to God or whatever, but like as a human, he's fallible and he does get things wrong. So it's never been anything that's directly affected me. Maybe, there's like a few people who are like kind of shitheads who are like, well, the Pope says, and it's like, well, that's fine. We're here now. We're not in Rome. But other than that, it hasn't affected me too much interpersonally.
To come back to that as well, but which Pope said that? Was
I
it the
don't
guy
really
before, or is it Pope Emeritus, or is it the current Pope? Which Pope? Which Pope? Tell me which Pope.
Pope Francis is actually really cool. He says some kind of weird stuff, but he's actually really cool for a pope. Like blessing a stripper's parrot, that's pretty badass. Like think what you want about think what you want about the guy. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can get down with that. Hi, I'm Pope. This is a parrot. This belongs to a stripper. Yeah, I'll bless that.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? I'm like, nice, cool. I'll say what you want about the guy. That was actually really cool. Okay, not a broken clock and all that. Like that was actually really cool.
I'm in no way endorsing any form of religion or anything on this channel in any way, shape, or form. Before any of my regular viewers start going, "What is Phoebe on about now?" But just to put that out there, that sometimes the strangest of people can do the coolest of things.
Exactly.
So, we're starting your transition. So, when you started your medical transition, did that have an effect on you personality-wise and you and your social interactions? Now you were able to go from this point of my body is beginning to match my internal identity.
The biggest thing that I noticed, and I still kind of have this issue when I'm regular with taking my shots, I'm very irregular with it because I don't actually enjoy stabbing myself to inject hormones. When I'm regular with it, I feel a lot more blunted in my emotions, and I feel I like don't cry anymore, which is very weird to me. Because before it would be like I would drop a plate and I'd be like, oh no, like, and now like they're like grandma died, and I'm like, that sucks. Like I'm very blunted in kind of my emotional response to everything when I'm up on that. Physically, it was really weird because like I feel like even with working out and stuff like that, like if you go to the gym every day and you look in the mirror, like nothing's different. And then like one day you're like, holy shit, I'm jacked. That's kind of like how it was, where I was like, okay, like I'm not really seeing anything. And then one day I woke up and I was like, holy shit, like I have a goatee. Like I've never noticed that before. It was just like very gradual. It was kind of hard to notice because it was like so gradual. I don't think there was like a significant point where I was like, aha, like this is what I've been looking for. But it was interesting because it was every once in a while I'd be like, oh wow, like looking kind of like a dude right there. Cool. It was so gradual. I didn't really notice.
So when you were going through the transformative phases, did it affect how people treated you? I'm not talking about friends or family. I'm talking about, like service providers, members of the general public. And did that have an affirming effect, or was it something you were expecting?
It's a little bit double-sided with providers specifically. I got a lot of trans broken arm syndrome, which is essentially any kind of medical issue that I had to be because I was trans. I go to the doctor. I'm like, I have a cough. They're like, is it the testosterone? I'm like, no, I think I'm actually just sick. Or, hey, when I think I was, oh God, I must have been like 22, I think. I fell and I cut my leg open on chicken wire, like all the way open, like almost to the bone. And I went to go and get stitches and they were like, does this have anything to do with the surgery? And I'm like, can you please just staple my leg and let me go home? Like just weird stuff like that. That's something that changed a lot, where before, the doctor was just like, oh, here's like your Tylenol or whatever. And now they're like, are you sure it's not the hormones? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm no longer a human bleeding red blood. I'm now a human bleeding yellow and green rainbows instead.
I know. I turned into like a transgender transhumanist robot. Yeah, so that was one of them, and I don't love that one. That one's kind of annoying. The other thing that I noticed is two big ones. When I talk, people actually listen to me, which is refreshing. And they kind of take my authority like at face value. I could be like, you actually have like 230 bones in your body, and people would be like, true, that's actually really true. When before they'd be like, do you have a source for that? Like the kind of authority that comes with that is like, I'm like, wow, like very cool, that's very nice. And then strangers like out and about, like if I'm walking around and there's like women around and there's no one else around, they'll try to like get away from me, and I'm like, I promise I'm not gonna hurt you, like have a good night, like I'm sorry that I'm scaring you. Those are like the two big ones that I notice a lot.
So before you transitioned, would you say that you understood and experienced misogyny?
Yes, absolutely.
And since you transitioned, have you ever experienced the opposite, misandry?
Only in incredibly niche circumstances. I think when people talk about misandry, there's like this disconnect because they're thinking about the structural oppression that misogyny provides, right? Where like women are essentially a
Yeah.
second class. But like individual misogyny is different than structural misogyny, the same way that there is no structural misandry, but there is like individual misandry. So a lot of it, obviously, I get from like TERFs who don't know that I'm trans. And so I'm like a dirty, disgusting male. And I'm like, oh, if only you know, if only you knew, that kind of thing. And then, so the other thing that I am kind of honed in on is a little bit of the misandry that's like specific to trans men. Like the term is trans misandry. I don't really know how I feel about that. It kind of sounds too much to me. But like the specific kind of like transphobia that trans men get for being like infantilized, confused, like autistic little girls who've been brainwashed, like irreversible damage style kind of stuff, where it's like very specific to like trans men. I'm not really keen on the word like trans misandry. I feel like it's very inflammatory. But just like that very specific kind of like you are a trans man, ew, not just like you are trans. Just like that really niche kind of it. It's very few and far between, and it's very specific and very individual. I don't think there's like this phenomenon of like everybody hating men. But in individual experiences, like, yeah, I've definitely noticed that for sure.
And you mentioned earlier you have more blunted emotions. Does that color your judgment at all when you're on testosterone at all?
Actually, I don't think so. Because I was significantly more impulsive. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into this because I was younger. You know, I was stupid. I was in college. You know, like I was like in my 20s, like my early 20s. So it could be, you know, my age or whatever, but I feel like significantly less impulsive now. Like I feel like because I'm blunted in my response to a lot of things, I don't react as quickly. So I feel like I'm a little bit more measured in my responses to a lot of things. But I think there's like a million things that could go into that. I don't know if testosterone just like magically made me more rational or not.
Well, if you believe certain Canadian lobster psychologists, then it must be the testosterone. it must be the. But yes, if
Very true.
people, just a random aside, if people in the chat can hear seagulls, that's my end because it's a nice warm day outside and I live by the seaside. Okay, so the seagulls are coming from my end because I just had Sadie in the chat go, I can hear seagulls, and say they're coming from my end. But you mentioned that you've had certain surgeries done.
Mhm.
And were they things that you had set out at the start and gone, okay, I'm going to have surgery A, I'm going to have surgery B, I'm going to have surgery C, etc., etc.?
Definitely. I wanted top surgery. Probably like my whole life, like even before I knew what it was, because I always wanted to, you know, like run around outside without a shirt on or swim without a shirt. And my parents and my grandparents let me, obviously, until like I started hitting puberty, and they were like, "Oh no, like Bubba, you have to put that away." So that was something that I always wanted, and then I've never wanted biological children. Like, has never been something that I've even been close to considering. So that and a hysterectomy were like constant. I was like, I just don't need it. Like, it's not necessary for me. I think when I was like 16 or 17, I was asking my mom, I was like, "Can I get a hysterectomy?" And she was like, "Oh, my sweet summer child, they will actually never give you a hysterectomy unless you're married to a man who says it's okay." And I was like, "What? Like, this is kind of weird."
Wow. Talk about gatekeeping.
I know. I was like, "Well, thanks for being honest with me, Mom. I appreciate the honesty." And then phalloplasty is something that I have always been interested in. I was kind of on the fence with it for a little while, just because obviously there's like, I feel like with every surgery, there's a ton of misinformation. And so I was kind of bought into that for a little bit where I was like, oh my God, like this is going to be horrible. Like it's not going to work. There's going to be so many complications, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if I really want it. But after, you know, spending time around people who have had phalloplasty, like having consultations with surgeons, like all this other stuff, I was like, okay, yeah, for sure. Like I was correct in my initial assessment that this is something that I want. Right.
So you've mentioned that you've had top surgery and you've had a hysterectomy.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when you actually had your top surgery? What was that? What were those feelings like? Try to tell me, a trans woman who for her entire life has wanted a great big chest where you can't run around with the top off. Tell me what it was like for you when you were able to take your top off and run around without it on.
I feel I describe my transition almost like a circle where like I feel like when I started my life, I was kind of where I wanted to be, like minus a few things where I was able to like hang out with the boys. I was able to, play football and pee in the woods and swim without a shirt on. And then I had like this chunk where I had to like pause my life and pretend to be something that I wasn't. And then at the end of that like little chunk, I was able to rediscover myself and come back full circle to like who I always knew that I was. And so it was kind of like, it was almost like nostalgia. It was like just, this is how I was. This is how I've always wanted to be. And I finally get to be this way. And I was like, this is just like the best. It just felt like the best way I can describe it is it felt like I came full circle to like I started where I wanted to be, or at the very least where as far as I could be at the time. And I've come back to that. And I feel like I'm able to like restart where I left off before I had to put like the pause button on that.
And just from a physiological point of view, what was it like when you looked down and went, I don't have titties anymore?
It's the best. I was like, hell yeah, brother. Like, well, because I was part of the itty bitty titty committee, so I was very blessed in that department. So it was kind of like it's a little bit flatter than usual. Nice, like before
So you weren't part of the giant bahunga community then?
No, I was not smacking myself in the face when I was running. It was pretty tame, so it's a little lucky there.
But you talk about having some small tits to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you think would have caused more dysphoria for you if they had been of a larger size?
Definitely, because it was actually pretty easy for me to like conceal that I had like boba. My posture is still suffering from this, obviously, like putting my shoulders forward, wearing larger shirts, a binder, like a couple of sports bras. It was actually pretty easy. It wasn't unless I like, kind of like stood up straight that you could see that they were there. So I did a pretty good job doing that. I feel like if I had, big honkers, it would be something that would be a little bit more hard to conceal. And I was also incredibly, incredibly lucky because I was able to get a minimally invasive top surgery procedure. So I don't have scars. I didn't have to take care of anything. I'm an incredibly lazy person. I pick at every scar that I have. So I was very excited to like not have scars to like fuck with, while I was in the middle of healing. So I feel like if I had bigger honkers, it would have definitely caused a little bit more distress for me and multiple.
So when the phrase minimally invasive is thrown around, that kind of medical this is and that's and ins and outs but what exactly does that mean in your context?
So typically if you get double incision, the way that it'll work is that you have like your boob, and then they'll just like go straight across, and then they take your nipple off of the tissue that they removed, and then they graft it onto your chest. So this is the traditional surgery that has like the incisions underneath the pectoral muscle. The nipples are grafted on. For me, I had it's called keyhole surgery, where they just make a really small incision around the outside of the areola and use liposuction. So I don't have any scarring, and if I do, you can't see it because it's like right underneath here. So minimally invasive, meaning that I didn't have to have like my chest essentially opened in order to liposuction. They were able to go in like just through a small incision and get everything out.
And you also mentioned that you've had a hysterectomy. Mm-hmm. What was your thinking behind wanting a hysterectomy, and what was it? And what was that process like? Just so that we can almost kind of explain that it is possible and it's not one of these far-flung things that's out of reach for people that are listening.
So like I said, I always wanted a hysterectomy. I had no need for it. I didn't want biological kids. It was never something that I cared about. And then for a prerequisite for phalloplasty, it's basically a la carte, so you can kind of get what you want with surgery. Some people choose to keep the vaginal canal open. I do not want that. In order to get vaginectomy, you have to have your cervix removed because there's no way to like get up in there to check for cervical cancer once the canal is closed. So as a prerequisite for surgery, I had to get a hysterectomy for the type of surgery that I wanted. So that kind of expedited the process because that was something that I had wanted for a long time. but negotiating with insurance and with a physician as well in order to get a hysterectomy is really difficult. But being able to say like, look, I need this surgery before I can get this surgery, they're like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. We can do that one. That's for sure. But outside of that, a lot of it was like, what if you change your mind? What if you want biological kids? What if you meet a man? Just typical run of the mill hogwash that comes with being somebody who is AFAB who needs reproductive services.
And did your mum's prophecy come true that you would only get it if you had the approval of a man? Did your mum's prophecy come true?
In a way, yes, because I was the man that gave the approval. So in a way,
you see,
it was like a monkey paw prophecy.
Okay, you've become the man, and you're going to approve it to yourself. So
exactly.
So in a way that it was, going full circle. But now you say you're still waiting for a phalloplasty. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on the current state of medical technology and the current state of phalloplasties that are available for trans mascs?
I think it is kick-ass, honestly. I think a lot of people, trash all over phalloplasty. I think that the way that we have it set up now, assuming that you're going to a reputable surgeon and not somebody who has never done phalloplasty before, the complication rates are incredibly low. Overall satisfaction is rated incredibly high. Complication rates are still a little, most of them will heal on their own without additional surgeries or interventions or anything like that, like small openings, small strictures, small infections. These things usually go away on their own. Sensation wise, with like micronerve hookups, the techniques that people will use now with microsurgery, sensation is almost always guaranteed. It's virtually unheard of for people to lose sensation, tactile or erogenous sensation with phalloplasty. I think that there's just a lot of misinformation that floats around about bottom surgery, phalloplasty in particular, metoidoplasty not so much, but phalloplasty. People, it's like a bad word for a lot of people because there's just a lot of misinformation about it. A lot of people are really secretive about the results, which I understand because, I've seen the way that people talk about trans people's bodies, and trans people talk worse about trans people's bodies sometimes than cis people do, unfortunately. So I understand kind of the secrecy around it, that you don't want your body out there for everybody to be like, oh, I would rather, die than have a body that looks like this. Like, I understand that as well. But I think a lot of it is just misinformation, and phalloplasty kicks ass.
So you say you've been waiting 3-4 years. Is that correct for it?
Yeah, I started, I want to say in 2018. 2018 is when I started. I had a consultation. I had a date. I had to move my date because I didn't quit smoking because I was a bad noodle. That one was my fault. And then I lost my job, lost my insurance, finally got insurance, was able to reschedule, switch jobs, got different insurance. So now I'm waiting again to set up a date. And I'm potentially maybe moving depending on if my wife gets this new job or not. So I've just been kind of in limbo waiting for the right time.
So you say that will be the completion of your transition.
Yes.
When that day comes, and you go back, and you could go back in time to say high school you. You're both at, say, a Seattle brand of coffee shop. And you're sat at the same table. What do you say to each other when you walk in and sit down?
Man, I would have a list of girls to block their phone numbers up immediately. I think that the one thing that I kind of needed when I was younger was just the ability to I was under the impression always that emotions are very black and white, and that if something isn't okay, it's never going to be okay. And being able to understand that processing through this and that there's always an opposite, right? When I was younger, I struggled a lot with being sad and feeling locked in that. So being distressed about something, one, and not knowing why, because I didn't even know what being trans was. I didn't understand what my issue was with my appearance or how I wanted to be treated. So giving older me like that language one, and then that comes and goes. That like when you're in an emotion, it feels like eternity, especially when you're like 16, 17. Like high school is your whole life. People making up rumors about you, that's going to follow you until you die, but nobody's going to remember in 2 weeks what people said anyway. Just
Or
kind of,
15 minutes.
yeah, literally like 20 minutes later, there's like a fight in the cafeteria, and that's the new gossip. Like it goes away so quickly. But when you're in it, like it's everything. And just explaining that like it sucks right now, but it doesn't suck forever. And these stages of like ups and downs are so short, like in hindsight, that it's not worth getting like so worked up over something that is honestly just going to kind of come and go. Like just let it pass through you and it's going to be fine. Like a lot of it would be like, more so my emotional maturity, I think, that I would like to explain to my younger self, or even just giving like the language of transition, because I knew, but I didn't know. I feel like I always had that resolve about like, this is what my issue is. I just didn't have the language to explain it. I think a lot of it was getting like stuck in like that. This sucks and it's always going to suck. Like that would be like the one thing that I would definitely want to work on with young me.
And what do you think young you would say to you in this scenario? What do you think the retort would be, or the opening salvo?
Probably relieved that like it was possible, right, to like be able to transition. When I had first gone to college, before I started medically transition, or knowing that I could medically transition, I was convinced that I was going to unalive myself before I turned 25. So just knowing that I had like something on the other side of that would have been really cool to see, or at least know about, right? Because I just could not imagine my life past the age of 25. I didn't think that I would make it. I was like, it's too much, existence is too difficult. So like just showing like and within that as well, when I first started transitioning, I don't know if this is your experience, but I've noticed that a lot of people wrap their transition in like wallow and sadness and distress and angst and anger and everything's horrible and being trans sucks. And just showing even like younger transitioned Malcolm, like, dude, like you have like a job and a wife and a house and dogs and you're fine. Like transition is not your entire life. Like you're not like crying every day, like wanting to perish. Like it's fine. Like it's okay. Like you can be a well-adjusted adult and be trans. Like it's not like you're going to be a cave goblin forever. Like it's okay,
And the question is, what drink do you order today, and what drink does younger you order?
Oh man, we probably are still both drinking Mountain Dew. I got to be honest with you.
And the question is, which flavor Mountain Dew? Which flavor is the real question.
Young me liked the original. Old me likes the Code Red. So there's a little bit of disparity there.
That's a very military style transition that you've done there. You've gone from the original one to this Code Red stuff, because I remember when Code Red came out, and I got this message from this friend of mine. I'd been in the British Army for a brief period in my life, and we went and met some Americans that were on the base in Norfolk. And you take numbers of people, and randomly, when this Code Red came out, it's like, this is the real Mountain Dew from now on.
The Mountain Dew fandoms are so competitive. Like I'm genuinely surprised that they're all so angry about Mountain Dew. It's very interesting.
This is the Mountain Dew from now. No other Mountain Dew, but this one.
Oh yeah.
This one or nothing else. But you mentioned that on your show, on your channel, you do trans masc discussions and trans masc panels. What would you say you've learned from doing those discussion panels about yourself and your transition?
I think that when you're online, which is where unfortunately a lot of us have to congregate, because there's not a ton of like in real life trans places, unless you live in like San Francisco or something, right? Anybody who isn't in like a major coastal city, you're kind of on your own, right? So a lot of us
you can come to the trans capital of the UK, where I happily live, in Brighton and Hove. It's wonderful down here.
I've heard.
But it's not the norm. We only had 20,000 people at Trans Pride Brighton's annual protest, but that's
I know there's like 5 where I live, and I know all of them, and I don't like any of them. So for personal reasons, not because they're trans, I just don't like them as people. So I'm kind of like, So I think, excuse me.
Oh dear.
I think for me, being online all the time, especially in like, this is just my experience. So when I came out, trans medicalism is like a huge issue in the trans masculine community. You know, like you have to want to get top surgery. You have to want to look like a guy. If you paint your nails, like you're not actually trans, like you're a faker. And so
That's very toxic.
it is. It's incredible. It's amazing to me. And I'm just like, you guys are so weird. Can you please go outside? Like cis guys paint their nails all the time. Just go outside. Like, I swear to God.
Have you seen 80s punk rockers? Have you seen them, mate?
I know. It's very strange to me. It's very strange. But you're kind of fed as somebody who's like binary and like wants to pass and just kind of like live life, you know, as like a normal trans person or whatever. You're kind of fed this bullshit where it's like all of the trans trenders are coming and taking your resources, and there's no place for like normal trans people anymore. All these weird people are taking over the trans movement or whatever. And, you know, sometimes I kind of get a little brain poison. I'm like, you know, there's nowhere out there for us regular trans folk, you know, heavy quotation marks, regular trans folk, you know. And in talking to multiple people of like different backgrounds, different experiences, from different places and all this other stuff, I learned that like a lot of the shit that you see online where we're kind of pitted against each other is so fake. It's so
trans
fake.
man versus trans woman in the battle of the real trans person. It's like
it's the same thing even when I talk to trans women, where it's like when I'm on Twitter, it's like, you have to hate every trans woman. Trans women are so mean to trans men, and you know, trans men like hate trans women, and you guys should fight each other every time you see each other. And then, you know, you spend like 10 minutes talking to somebody and you're like, you know, I guess this actually isn't like that bad.
Like we've had this much chat for over an hour now and we're still going.
I know, and we're not fighting or anything, but you know, I see like a tweet and everybody's like, look at this evil trans woman, they're all awful. And I'm like, is it really like that though, you guys?
Unless of course it's a certain Debbie Hayton, unless it's that kind of trans person.
Yes, I agree. Like there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you know, it's not as bad as being online. And talking to other people, like I feel like kind of pulls me out of that like internet nihilism where I'm like, everything sucks and we all hate each other. And then I talk to people and I'm like, oh well, you know, I guess we actually have more in common than once thought, right?
So you're an American. You live in America.
I do.
Where do you see America going? Because it seems to be in a very odd position when it comes to minority rights, and trans rights in particular seems to be a focus of 5 individuals who've got lifetime tenure in a certain building in Washington, D.C. Where do you see the conversation in America going surrounding trans rights?
I think it's going to go, I think it's going to get kicked all the way up to the 10 people that have tenure, and it's going to be a states' rights issue, which in my opinion is better than totally federally banning it, because at least then we have pockets of places that are safe, right? Where like if you live in Alabama, at least there's hope that maybe you can get to a blue state or something, right? Ideally, I don't think that this should be legislated at all. I think that things that are usually talked about and discussed between like a provider and a patient, that should never be legislated on. That's insane. Like that's absolutely fucking crazy. I would never accept the government saying like, sorry, you can't actually get a kidney transplant, it's illegal now. Like that's crazy. Like I don't understand that at all. I think eventually what's going to happen is it is going to become a states' rights issue, and there's going to be an attempted, for most, you know, obviously there's going to be people that are totally fucked. But I think there's going to be a mass exodus of people from red states to blue states, whether they're trans people who are like, oh my God, like I can't get the medical care that I need, or it's people who are like, this is fucked up. Like, I can't believe that you're trying to legislate this. And I think that we're going to continue to see like that trend of people leaving these areas because hyper fundamentalist people want to control everything. I think very end of the line, I think it's going to be like a states' rights issue. I hope that it never goes to the Supreme Court and we never have to have that conversation in the first place. But I do think that eventually that's where it's going to end up, is going to be like a states' rights issue, which I hate. But I do think it's better than a total, like, we're going to re-education camp tomorrow. I definitely think that's more preferable. But I also don't love it. You know what I mean? So
would you say that the horizon in America for particularly trans rights, would you say things are on a downward trend overall because of the toxicity of the discourse that's going on? Or do you think this is something that we're going to get over and then it's going to return to you exist again?
I think it depends on I think it's going to depend on the 2024 like election cycle. Honestly, I think that the issue that we have in America specifically is that the pendulum swings so far right, but not far enough left. So when we have somebody who's right leaning who takes the presidency, we see like a lot of executive power being put behind what they want to accomplish, right? Whether it's building the wall, whether it's banning certain types of immigrants, whether it's, making sure insurance doesn't cover these things, making sure Medicare is getting slashed. But when we swing left, we're pretty docile, right? Like the left doesn't really do a whole lot of anything, unfortunately. So what we see is like when the pendulum swings, it swings really hard right, and then it kind of goes back into the middle. So I'm concerned that like right now, because we're kind of in the middle on the left, if it goes back farther right, we're going to keep getting dragged further right, but we're not going to push back left with the next kind of cycle. So I think it's going to depend on the 2024 election cycle. I think it's going to depend on who's running, on who gets elected, and then how far they're willing to go to like kind of make this a thing. Because I know that the culture war is like the hot button topic all the time, unfortunately. But it depends because some candidates don't prioritize that shit at all. So it just kind of depends, unfortunately.
Do you think it's particularly an internet microcosm thing? And when you step off the internet, people worry more about everything else in their life, and trans rights, unless of course you're directly impacted by it, kind of falls away.
I think it depends. It depends on the person, definitely. Something that I notice a lot is that a lot of the people that I know or have grown up around are very conservative, very disgustingly conservative. But I notice that because they know me, they take like a softer approach to either like gay issues or like trans issues or something like that. Like when I was a lesbian, I had a lot of friends who were conservative who were like, gay marriage. And then I was like, yeah, gay marriage, man. They're like, well, I guess that's true. I guess you do want to be married someday. Like, I guess that's fine. Void of me, they would probably just be like, fuck gay marriage, right? Where it's like there's kind of like that bridge that kind of humanizes it. I think in real life, if you're able to like meet somebody who's like, trans people are so scary and evil, and you kind of like build that bridge with them where it's like, me, I'm not scary and evil. You can kind of sway people like just a little bit. In real life, I think the culture war shit is pretty muted. I think that there are people that definitely care about it, but I don't think it's as important as like people being worried about like job security or people being worried about gas being like $6 a gallon. Like I think that's kind of people's priority.
I take your $6 a gallon and I laugh in the face of your $6 a gallon and then top you with $9 a gallon.
Y'all are just struggling over there. It's okay.
Yeah. £2 some places were charging for 1 litre of petrol, which worked out to be about $9.40. I did the conversions. It's like
here it's like $6. One of my friends lives like in the heart of Seattle. It's like $10 there. I have friends that live in New York. It's like $10 there. We're pretty okay right here. It's like six.
You're doing well in your Pacific corner of the earth.
The Pacific Northwest.
Do people in the Pacific Northwest, do they worry that you're going to don't drive across the border and get cheaper gas in the Great White North and then drive back with cheaper gas in your car?
Unfortunately, where I am, the border is like it's quite a while away. And then the other thing as well is that right above Washington, most of the big cities are coastal. You have to go a little bit into Canada to find anything. So it's by the time that I get back, I probably spent the same amount of money.
It's like trying to find Vancouver. It's a long way into Canada.
Yeah, it's pretty up there. A lot of the stuff that's on the border, it's not like if you cross the border and go to Mexico, like they have like a ton of shit right on the border, like cities and bars and like actually good Mexican
tourists
food.
welcome.
Yeah, and then they have like dentist clinics. They're like, don't pay like $10,000 to get your cavity filled, and we're like running. We're like, let's go. But on Canada, it's like you have to go up in there to find anything. It's like I don't even know what is this gas station. Is there anybody that even works here? It's very interesting.
It's like, okay, ring bell for service.
Exactly.
Hello there.
You're like at the border and the Mounties are nowhere to be found. You're like, can I cross? Hello.
It's like Walter White in the penultimate episodes of Breaking Bad in his cabin in the middle of nowhere going, okay, I guess I'm in the middle of nowhere then.
Exactly.
So you do your trans masc panels. Do you ever find it difficult to get enough people on your panels?
Definitely. Over the summertime specifically, but I also take hiatuses during the summertime. I like to say that I am terminally offline in the summertime. I enjoy being outside, doing the outside kind of stuff, so I kind of slow down a little bit. Um, it depends on the topic, honestly, because there are certain topics that everybody feels the need to participate in, and then there are certain topics that are like very I don't want to say niche, but almost specialized, right? Where it's like if you don't have this experience, you're not going to be able to contribute anything to it. So why bother? So I think it definitely depends on the topic, and then I also think it depends on the time of year because when it's nice outside, nobody wants to sit inside on the computer for multiple hours, right? You want to be outside.
This is very true. As I say, I would have regretted if I'd booked this interview in last week because, for the Americans in the audience, it did hit 104 in this country, which is like madness at 40 degrees in this country. But I do hear what you're saying. And do you think that there's a problem with the representation of trans men in general? And do you think that the space is, for want of a better word, dominated by people who look like me?
I think it is going to be contingent on the space. I have heard mixed reviews on places like Reddit. I've heard that I don't use Reddit very often. I've heard that Reddit is.
I only found out what Reddit was like a few days ago. I only found out what on earth it was.
Save yourself. It's not user friendly at all. Good luck. I've heard people say that Reddit is pretty heavily dominated by trans men, but I've also heard from other people that it's very dominated by trans women. So it honestly depends on who you're talking to. There are certain spaces, like Facebook groups. Apparently all the trans men are on Facebook. I guess that's where we all are, which is weird. I don't like that at all. I'm not like a 40-year-old wine mom. I'd rather not use Facebook. It depends
posting
on,
pictures of your children running around and your dog and your white picket fence.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh, it's wine o'clock. Uh-oh. Like I don't know. I'll
oh dear, it's Pim's o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, ladies. It's like I can't. So I think it depends on the space. But the spaces that I've seen and the spaces that I participate in, a lot of the discourse is centered around trans feminine people, and a lot of the people who are platformed are trans feminine people. I think, and I could be wrong. I think there's me and one other person who has ever been on a political panel who is a trans man or a trans masculine person. But they have no problem, picking out of a hat of 25 plus trans women who stream politics, but there just aren't very many trans guys who do that. I think honestly it's like me and one other person. I think so I think it depends on the space. I think that if you go to like YouTube, there's a shit ton of trans guys. Like there's so many of us. Like you can't tell Aiden, Braden, and Caden apart. There's so many. But like on Twitch politics, there's like 2. And then there's like 25 plus trans women that are ready to jump in and do this or whatever. I think it just depends on the space. Most of the spaces I think are trans women dominated. Like representatively, there's more of you in that space. But I'm not. I don't know. I don't have any like raw numbers. I just go off of like where the discourse is and who's talking.
Anecdotes.
What's the topic and who's talking about it? Usually it's like it's usually like, can trans people have periods? And all the trans women are like talking about it. And then trans men are like, we also have periods. And then trans women are like, anyway, so back to the topic. And I'm like, okay, so that's their conversation. We'll come over here and we'll have our conversation. Like, it just seems very fragmented. It's just like, what is the topic and who's talking about it? That's usually how I can tell.
So you mentioned that you started your channel doing things like prostheses and stuff. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to say this about myself on this topic of, prostheses stuff. I'm about as ignorant as they come. So why don't you give me a 101 on A, what on earth they are, and B, if a trans masc person asks me for some advice, where should I point them?
So usually there's different kinds. Obviously, you can get them for whatever you want. The 2 most common ones, a company called Gender Cat will make their like silicone prosthetic nipples. So like if you get double incision and you don't get nipple grafts, you can buy these little dudes and just like stick them on. They're like googly eyes, but like actually nipples. That way you don't have to worry about. Some people will get them tattooed on. Some people don't want that. Some people have necrosis of the tissue, and so it's nice to be able to just pop them on. Like if you're going to the beach or something like that. So that's one of them. The ones that I mostly bought and reviewed were wiener prosthetics, and for multiple different reasons. There's multiple different kinds. Some of them are just like soft that create like a bulge in the pant, that you just wear casually, right? Just a little bulge. STPs or stand-to-Ps are like little funnels, but they look like wieners, so you can use them at a urinal, and nobody's going to be like, "Why do you have a bendy straw at the urinal?" So those are nice. And then there's also ones that are like hyper realistic, and they're used for sexy times. That are also look like wieners. So those are the kinds. Depending on your price range, there's going to be a bunch of different options. My personal favorite is Emisil. It's Emisil. Really high quality stuff. I've had mine for 6+ years and they're still kicking. They're doing really good. Very high quality. They're a little pricey, but that's okay. Lower quality, like a little bit cheaper. Probably something like the letter E, and then the letter Z, and then the word P. That's going to be a good one. That's a little bit more affordable. Mr. Limpy is another good one that is affordable. I feel like a cartoon villain right now. They all have very comical names, so unfortunately, you can't get away from that. But
do they ship in discreet packaging?
Oh, they do absolutely ship in discreet packaging. I still have the box actually. It's like a black box. I put all my cords in it, my extra cords. It's just like it looks like a magician's box almost. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then you open it and you're like, oh, good heavens, a penis. And then, but yeah, exactly. But they come in, a fine box. They're totally fine. No worries, no issues. Just going to depend on your price range. Emisil, definitely would recommend if you can afford it. You do get what you pay for. I will say that if you buy like a cheap, shitty one, it's probably going to tear. It's not going to last forever. Get what you pay for. You know what I'm saying?
So, when you started exploring prosthetics, what did you look for in a prosthetic?
I wanted something that I only had to buy one time, something that I could use that would be it wouldn't be like, they're called shiwis. They're like pink and purple, obviously. Of course, because they're for girls. And they're like a little funnel, you can't use that at a urinal. Somebody's just gonna knock you the fuck out if they see you pull that out of a urinal. So for me, it was like functionality. Am I gonna get my ass beat? Can I use it? Is it gonna last me a long time? Those are like the things that I look for when I'm looking at stuff. That's pretty much it. Functionality, is it going to last forever? And am I going to get my ass beat with it? Those are like the top 3 things that I always look for.
And the final thing I wanted to ask you about was, well, on this topic at least, was, well, binders.
Mm-hmm.
Are they in any way difficult to get hold of? Where would you start? And where did you start?
Outside of the US, unfortunately, it is kind of a pain because most of the companies are US based, and international shipping, as we all know, is not kind or gracious. GC, like the letter G, letter C, the number 2, and then the letter B. They make them. GC2B and Underworks are like the 2 big companies. They're going to be the most reliable. They're going to be the most durable. Their customer service is really good. So if you get the wrong size, they're big enough companies where they're willing to work with you, kind of go back and forth. A lot of people will look on like Amazon or like Etsy. These kind of places I would stay away from because the sizing is going to be a little bit iffy. And also the way that Underworks and GC2B design their binders is that the compression is only in the front. So it's not damaging your ribs if you have the right size. A lot of the ones that you buy on Amazon and like Etsy and all this stuff, they compress all the way around. And that's really bad for your ribs to be in like a little teeny tiny compressing cage all day. Not good for your ribs.
Victorian England found that, that kind of thing was really bad for you.
Yes. Unfortunately, it is. Because I am a big dingus. I overbound because I was working in kitchens. You're supposed to wear a binder from 6 to 8 hours a day. Not supposed to wear it more than that. You're supposed to, be comfortable, be able to like pull it around and stuff. I was like young. I was like, fuck it. Who cares? I now have permanently deformed ribs. So don't be a silly noodle.
That's not a good thing. That's really not a good thing.
Yes. Do not be a silly noodle like me. I started binding. I had a GC2B binder. I had a few of them. But I preferred binding tape. So kinesiology tape. It's like 98%. No, it's like 100% elastic. It's something like that. And you just kind of like tape it down, but you only do it like right here, so it's not hurting you. It's not like wrapping your chest in like tape. It just kind of like pulls your boobs back a little bit. I prefer that because it wasn't as sweaty and hot working in kitchens. It just kind of depends on your preferences. Unfortunately, the tape does not work well for people that have big boba, unfortunately. But GC2B and Underworks are always really good because they're like reputable companies. You know, the sizing is accurate and they're willing to work with you. I would never buy an Amazon binder. I would never buy a binder that has like Tomboy in the name of it. Absolutely the fuck not. That's not going to be good for you. A lot of people also like the strapless ones. Don't do that because all the pressure's on your ribs. Don't buy the ones that clip because all the pressure is going to be, you guessed it, right here on your ribs. Just making sure that, you know, GC2B and Underworks, you just can't go wrong because these are going to be the most comfortable and they're reputable and they're not going to fuck up your ribs if you're wearing them correctly.
So you're at the end stage, would you say, of your transition now?
I'm getting there.
What would you say to a trans masc that's just popping out of their shell and sees the big scary world in front of them? What would you say to that person?
Just be curious and be patient. Those are like the two biggest things. Like, I feel sometimes because I'm older and I'm getting more grumpy as the day goes on, right? I have
You're becoming a grumpy old man.
I am. I'm like slowly turning into Buck Angel, like Everest. No, I'm just kidding.
No!
No, I'm just kidding. I have to remind myself sometimes that people are going to have stupid questions. I would just say, don't be afraid to ask like the stupid question. Somebody has an answer for you. People might say like dumb shit, like, what do you mean you don't know that testosterone is going to give you a beard or whatever? They're going to say stupid shit. That's fine. But don't be afraid to ask those stupid questions because I had those questions at one point too. Everybody has. We are not born into this world with the walking, talking, breathing knowledge of transition encoded into our DNA. We all had to learn it. We all asked dumb questions. We all made a fool of ourselves, whatever. We all did the mascara beard. We've all been there. Okay. We've all struggled. Be curious, and those questions are okay to ask, and be patient because all good things take time and all good things are worth waiting for. If you get it too quickly, it's not worth waiting for, right? It makes the reward better. And also you don't have to rush. Like like I talked about a little bit earlier, like that waiting period for me in the moment was like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. In hindsight, I felt it was very rewarding. And I felt that it was something that was really important for me to be able to process that. In the moment, again, I was like, oh, this is so dumb. But like that patience and waiting, and being able to like not just zip through because it's never going to be like that. There's not like a magic box that you walk into and then you come out and you're like, aha, I'm a man. It is going to take time. It is going to be time consuming. If only, right? If only it was like the Green Goblin gas chamber or whatever. That'd be super cool. But a lot of people are just like wanting to zip through. And it's like, I understand that. I get that. You have an idea where your endpoint is, but like, take your time. There's honestly not a rush. It's okay to wait. It's okay to take your time to figure it out. You don't have to get surgery tomorrow to be real or like actually a trans guy. You don't have to start hormones right now in order to be seen as valid. Like, it's okay to take your time and figure stuff out. That's totally fine. I'd be like my big three. Be patient, be curious. Don't rush. Take your time. Everything's fine.
And what's your biggest takeaway from your transition?
Probably that introspection, self-discovery, and self-knowledge are invaluable. And there's nothing that I can do in my life now that I've had time to like kind of go through this process. There is nothing that I could do to try and better myself that I would regret. That any kind of investment that you make in yourself, if it's physically, if it's emotionally, if it's mentally, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're making that investment to make yourself a better person and align more closely with who you think you should be or who you know yourself to be, there's no mistake that you can make. And that just that introspective process has been the biggest, most important thing to me because I don't think that I would ever know myself this well or know like what I'm capable of or where my limits are. Like all of these things are things that I had to learn, quote unquote, the hard way, unfortunately, by going through transition and asking myself these hard questions. And I don't know if I ever would have asked myself those questions had I not, trans my gender,
And do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up our fabulous conversation today?
I don't think
so.
so.
You want to ask me anything?
What's it like on Turf Island? How's that over there?
This face that people can see, this is a very calm face. I've learned to be a calm person when I'm going out and about. But being on Turf Island at the moment is not the most enjoyable of experiences, particularly with our current political climate that's going on, considering we have the wackadoo versus the billionaire running to be the next prime minister, which is going to be a very interesting outcome. We got rid of the clown, and we're now going to replace the clown with the wackadoo or the billionaire, and those are the choices. And it's just like, it's a very scary time, but where we've so gradually got used to it, only when you step outside of it do you realize just how crazy it's got in this country, just how round the bend this country has gone. And I do fear that America could be taking pointers from Britain and going, you know what?
That's a good
where
idea.
we want to go. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that as well, where I'm like, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Like, have we learned nothing as our history of Americans that's kind of where we don't want to be, right? Like, didn't we already fight a war over this, you guys? Didn't we already do this? Maybe we should learn
Don't
from
want
the
to do it
past.
again. Right? As somebody said to me, things that are fiction should remain fiction.
Oh, I
We
agree.
should not be turning fiction into reality. Particularly things like The Handmaid's Tale should not be being turned into, reality in some parts of America, which is unfortunately where it's headed to. And it's just one of these things where you just go, oh dear. But yes, it has been an absolutely fantastic conversation with you today, Malcolm. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation with me and that I've been a wonderful conversationalist.
As always, I had an excellent time. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm always good for a little vibe sesh. I'm always down.
But here's something. Here's an idea. I want to pitch this idea to you as
I'm
a
ready.
trans guy who brought it up. Pitch this at the end. I'm an ignorant trans woman when it comes to prosthesis.
Okay.
I'd love to do a show and tell with you or another trans guy where you bring all these things out and you explain to me, an ignorant trans woman, what the bloody hell these things are.
Wonderful.
And I think it would make wonderful YouTube. I think it would make wonderful viewing experiences.
Always. I can get my box of dicks whenever you'd like.
But as I say, that's an idea I just wanted to float around. But where can people find you, Malcolm, on the internet? And where can people find what you're doing on the internet? And what exactly do you do?
I am goddammit Malcolm on everything.
God damn it.
God damn it. On Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, on all the things. I stream when I feel like it. Normally in the mornings. But again, as it's summertime, I'm kind of an outside boy, so I've been doing a lot of that. I haven't streamed in like 2 weeks. But normally what we're doing is we're watching horrible videos and we're looking at really stupid arguments that people make against trans people and kind of breaking them down. My editor, Rowan, the wonderful Rowan, right now is re-editing all of the videos that I recorded for when I was reading Irreversible Damage, so I can re-upload them. They were unfortunately copyright infringed because I had showed the book. So Rowan is editing them for me so I can re-upload. So those are working.
Let me just get this right. You showed a picture of the book.
Yes. Well, to be clear, I had a PDF of the book that I was reading from. So because I showed the entire book, it's copyright.
You showed the entire book. Okay.
Yes.
So you weren't just showing excerpts.
No, it was literally I had the PDF open and I was scrolling and reading verbatim. So Rowan has blurred that for me and edited out a lot of the verbatim.
Because I was going to say that there are certain things where you can get away with failures, but if you are just verbatim,
yes, no, that was my mistake. Okay, that was my bad. Hindsight's 2020. So Rowan's editing those for me. Those are coming back out, and I'm currently working on a video essay that is well put together because I have I think it's 12 hours of content from reading Irreversible Damage. I want to do a shorter video essay. Been working on that. I don't know when that's going to be done. But mostly we just watch stupid videos like Buck Angel saying stupid stuff or,
Buck Angel saying stupid stuff. You may as well just watch Buck Angel.
Exactly. And then a lot of trans debates, a lot of trans conversations. I kind of like picking apart the arguments. At least for me, when I was younger, it was really irritating when somebody would bring up a statistic or a study that was total bullshit, but I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know what to say. So that's kind of stuff that I like giving to others. This is where this comes from. This is why it's not true, etc., so on and so forth. So that's mostly what we do. That's a big chunk of what we do on stream. Sometimes I play Call of Duty and swear, which is fun. And then occasionally I will argue with somebody and cuss them out in real time, which is also very exciting. So just depends on the day and the vibe.
Anyway, well, it has been a wonderful conversation with you, and I just want to say that if you want to do what I just pitched at you, you know where to find me. But it has been a fabulous conversation. I learn an awful lot from these conversations myself. But I do always say this towards the end of my shows. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe on both the Twitch and the YouTubes. But you do only get one life, and make sure that you live that one life to the best that you can, because you don't get a do-over of this life. So until next time, everybody, please stay safe. And Transition Stories today has been with Phoebe J. Rose, and my wonderful guest today has been
Malcolm.
This has been Transition Stories Season 4, Episode 5, and Transition Stories is a joint production of Phoebe J. Rose and Odd Tech Man. And until next time, stay safe and live that one life to the best that you can, because you don't get that do-over.